The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, FISPA members. This is here. Welcome to today's webinar, Combating Card Skimming, presented by ACG. We do have you muted, so if you have questions, please type them in the question box that's on your webinar control box on your screen. And we've allowed a lot of time at the end of the presentation. We'll go through the questions and make sure they're all answered. We are recording this webinar, so it will be available on the FSPA website in a day or two. And then the presentation slides will be emailed to you after the webinar is completed. With that said, I'd like to turn the presentation over to the team at ACG and our presenter today, anti-skimming.
Awesome. Thanks, BJ. Again, I'm anti-skimming, Global Business Development Manager for ACG. I want to thank you for joining the webcast today, and I appreciate your time that you're investing and your interest in the enhanced card security solution. As BJ said, after the presentation, we'll have some time for Q&A. I want to run through some of the goals of today's webinar with you. If you're not familiar with ACG, I want to share a little bit about our company. I'll give you a quick run through of, call it Skimming 101. We'll discuss the targets, what the skimming devices look like, how the technology continues to advance. I'll show you how we can help you protect your customers and help them protect their customers, all while protecting their good name. And I'll show you how the ECS 4-in-1 anti-skimming solution creates an immediate impact, both financially and strategically, to your business as a service provider. So a little about ACG. We've been in business for a little over 31 years now. We provide our customers with comprehensive ATM and branch management equipment solutions, as well as security solutions such as the ECS 4-in-1 anti-skimming solution we'll be discussing today. Our global customer base includes regional and national service providers, independent ATM deployers, major OEMs, security solution providers, and global integrators, where ACG performs the entire back-end logistics and fulfillment for their fleet management organization worldwide. ACG serves our customers from 3 primary offices that also include 5 warehouses. With a global warehouse footprint of over 200,000 square feet of space, we maintain the largest inventory of ATM systems in the world. Our global headquarters is out of Atlanta, so along with the Atlanta warehouses and tech center, and an additional stocking and logistics center in Las Vegas, we service the Americas and our customers in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, as well as in the Asia-Pacific Rim regions, are serviced out of our UK offices. So while some of you on the call today might already be experts in skimming, well, hopefully on the good side, right? For the rest of you who are just learning about this threat, I thought I'd provide a little, like what I kept calling it, Skimming 101. Right? Some questions I'll answer are, what is skimming? What's the impact to my customers? How do we stop the bad guys? And how our product provides a unique solution to protect your customers. So the definition of card skimming is the act of illegally collecting data from the magnetic stripe of a credit or debit card. The bad guy then copies this information onto another blank card's magnetic stripe, and that's what's used to make the purchases or withdraw cash in the name of the actual account holder. Skimming works by installing a device over the manufacturer's original card reader bezel in an ATM or other card payment terminal with a camouflaged counterfeit card reader, aka the skimming device. So that skimming device records all of the data on a credit or debit card's magnetic stripe as it passes through the skimmer. A common misconception, though, is that the EMV chip smart cards will solve all of the issues encountered with skimming. So this is not true, though. Until that magnetic stripe is completely eliminated from all credit cards, the threat of skimming will remain live and well. So while ATMs comprise the bulk of skimming attacks, they're not the only targets. Increasingly, commercial fueling stations, consumer fuel pumps, and even ticket kiosks have been added to the growing list of targets. Essentially, anything with a card reader is at risk. I wanted to make sure that we could also really understand how these skimming bezels look. So as you can see here in this particular image, hang on one quick second. There's going to be some crude ones out there. These aren't them, right? They're virtually indistinguishable from the original bezel. This makes it virtually impossible for that normal customer to be able to detect the skimming device, understand what is and what isn't supposed to be there. As in this case, you'll see that the comparison shows how difficult it can really be to spot a skimming device on an ATM. As the cost of 3D printing goes down too, it makes it easier and easier for the thieves to make a more realistic skimming device to fit any card reader. And while the picture on the right is the reader with the skimmer overlay, if you didn't remember what the normal reader looked like, you wouldn't have noticed the difference. And this is why, sadly, I'm also the guy that's jiggling every card reader, picking at it with my fingernail, getting grief from the wife about this, until I'm confident that it's real. And like all technology, with time, skimming technology too has gotten smaller and less expensive. Like you see here, these devices run on watch batteries, and they're so small they can be installed quickly, simply by the bad guys, and quick, not only quickly, but also provide no indication of any tampering that's happened. So I wanted to take a moment to also share with you a little personal side of my life, because since I'm living in this world, I'm also seeing hundreds of skimming-specific notifications daily. It's in the social media posts that I'm looking at. It's in all the regular news articles. It's happening anywhere there's an ATM. Most of the time, they'll even tweet a photo of the location, right? That's always good for business. Your bank or credit union name is always mentioned in the tweet or news article. Sometimes the bad guys are so brazen, they're doing it in broad daylight. It's definitely happening in all 50 states, and even sometimes in places you wouldn't have even imagined. So this one caught my eye because I didn't know what CNMI stood for, and there was an alert from CNMI about ATM skimming. So CNMI, as it turns out, stands for the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, which is an island chain consisting of 15 little islands. Saipan might be a name that you're familiar with. It's one of the islands in the CNMI, and in this case, First Hawaiian Bank was alerting its customers on Saipan that skimming devices were found on several of their bank-owned ATMs. Again, not entirely familiar with where these islands were. I zoomed out on the map, and I realized, number one, this is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. In fact, in this case, you can see that the little marker of where we're looking at is larger than the land mass. So if it can happen here, it really hit me. It can happen anywhere. So it shows skimming attacks truly are happening, and they're happening everywhere. If you needed some additional data outside of the daily news articles and social media posts, FICO issued a report on skimming activities that show that these attacks are at their highest point in 20 years. There's a year-over-year increase of 546%. It's actually a number I stumble upon. It's hard to imagine, on FI-owned ATMs. And attacks on non-FI machines, such as the ones you find at the gas station or even the ones that companies like yourself on this call own service, they're up over 300%. And if you assume that with the type of growth in the number of attacks happening, that the bad guys probably have figured out how to translate the larger number of attacks into more stolen funds, you'd be totally correct. In the U.S. alone, with the 400,000 plus ATMs deployed, the costs relating to skimming attacks are over $2 billion annually. This includes fund replacement, card replacement, legal fees, you name it. That's a huge price tag FIs and card issuers are soaking up every single year. So now that we understand the problem, the growing number of attacks, no geography that's immune from these attacks, difficulty in telling the good ATMs from the compromised ones, immediate hit to brand and reputation due to social media proliferation, and the financial impact, whether known or unknown to your customers, you might be asking, what can the good guys do to stop this? So given this environment, The ECS 4-in-1 anti-skimming solution is that answer to combat this growing threat. This is the only solution in the market that detects installed skimming devices using dual photosensing technologies while also actively jamming the signals from installed skimming devices, monitors and adjusts to the environment around the card bezel in a self-learning capacity, and logs all alerting events for use in internal reporting requirements, regulatory reporting, and even forensic data capture. Each ECS solution is part of a kit that's specific to the corresponding model of an ATM. It contains a card reader bezel that matches that specific ATM model. While we cover all of the major OEM ATMs, the sensor technology and jamming antenna is already pre-installed in each one of these bezels. The key to the ECS 4-in-1 success, and what makes it unique in the market, is that in addition to jamming, it also uses dual photosensing technology. What this means is that both infrared and ambient light sensors are constantly looking for foreign objects, light, reflection, and movement around the card bezel. The ECS 4-in-1 is self-calibrating, which effectively reduces false alarms. And what that means is it senses changes in its environment. It updates how it senses a threat. This is important because you might have a lady's purse blocking the bezel, or maybe somebody standing too close to the bezel during a transaction, or even the difference between leaves on a tree in the spring or summer for an island place machine, where you've got one part of the year where it's a different light, and you've got another part of the year where it's darker. The ECS will learn from the changes it senses, and it'll also change how it alerts and when it alerts. This is how we've engineered this solution to remove false positives and keep your techs focused on the real problem. Other standalone solutions using technology like capacitive sensing are prone to large numbers of false alarms. That's because capacitive sensing measures changes in the electromagnetic field surrounding the bezel. And why doesn't that work all the time? Because capacitive sensing is affected by disturbances picked up by cell phones, jewelry and watches, other metal objects, environmental effects like rain or snow. So the detection and jamming process, the heart of the ECS, is controlled by the DRC controller module. As mentioned, it is constantly sensing the changing environment around the card reader bezel. If a threat's detected, the ECS will begin a 5-cycle verification process to determine if this threat is indeed a fixed device that isn't moving, or if it's something that is being removed slowly through this process, or that's changing, right? Again, going back to the idea of the bag, or even blowing leaves. During this verification process, jamming is active. The jamming frequencies are random and disrupt the skimming device from being able to capture card data. So again, the end consumer is completely protected and the financial institution is protected. At the end of the 5-cycle verification process, if the threat's still in place, that's when the alarm is sent. The most common way notifications are sent is via dry contact output to an alarm panel. And in addition to the threat alarm, the ECS 4-in-1 can also send alerts for online, offline, or an error message even, that maybe the antenna is having an issue or a particular cable is loose, and that can be sent to the financial institution or the monitoring company so that that action can be taken. Once the threat has been removed, the ECS 4-in-1 will go back to ready status. This is the most important part. The ECS 4-in-1 does not take the ATM out of service or require a reboot of the ATM, but it will always be protecting the card data. This keeps your techs from rolling a truck for false alarms or having to reboot an ATM where it puts your SLAs for uptime at risk. So to recap, if a skimming device is detected, alerts are sent to the FI or whoever is providing the alarm monitoring. It could even be you. ECS actively jams the skimming device from being able to capture card data from the mag stripe, and the FI or service provider now has time to respond to the alert and remove that device without any card data being stolen. So now that you know how to eliminate the threat, how do you help your customers understand what we now both know? Some questions you can ask are, what do they do today to detect skimming attacks? What impact financially or time-wise have they already incurred? Either researching solutions or maybe testing other solutions. Do they physically check their fleet for devices? Do they do that hourly, daily, weekly, never? Do their FFIEC audited security policies include the processes for how they'd identify a skimming incident and document it? Maybe they've already had a skimming incident. How did that go? Did they make any changes to their processes? Did they see those impacts that we've already discussed and that ACG's already seen, financially speaking? These are just some of the questions I've asked to get banks and credit unions to realize that in most cases they don't have a plan and don't know how to combat this issue. I also want you to understand the sellable available market. So today we estimate the total number of ATMs in the U.S. at around 425,000. We'll call that the total available market for the U.S. So of those, about 204,000, give or take, are FI-owned ATMs. So let's assume for this example that half of them have some type of anti-skimming solution in place, or maybe it's already pre-installed, that's why they think they have it, or maybe it's somewhere but they don't use it. Either way, that would leave us with about 102,000 machines, we'll call the sellable available market. Based on what our service provider customers are selling the ECS Form 1 for today, we used $2,300 per unit, which would include the ECS hardware, installation fees you would charge, and any project management fees you might include. So the sellable available market in the U.S. is over $234 million. If you could capture just 20% of that, it would be almost $47 million in revenue. But let's bring those numbers closer to home. If, for example, you had 500 ATMs in your current fleet, and you installed half of those machines with ECS, you'd have $575,000 in net new revenue. If you looked at that as a 35% margin, that's over $200,000 in profit to your bottom line. That's not including annual maintenance, or if you provide the monitoring services, the addition of the skimming monitoring to that particular service contract for that end customer. So with that kind of financial impact to your business, how do you get the ball rolling? You get your sales team to talk about it with your current customers. That's the gimme. It provides a great opportunity to talk to those customers who quote, finger quotes, you can't see me, but that's what I'm doing in the air, who are all good for now. Right? We're set, we've got everything, we're not doing any additional investments, but you can get your foot in the door with those customers. Plus, how about those customers that are serviced by someone else who isn't maybe interested in your core offerings, but your competitors aren't doing this? Get ACG involved. That's what we do. Use our business development team or the account manager you already know and love who's working with you to get involved with the sales calls, on-site meetings, or lunch and learns. We host those for several customers all at once. We can help with marketing materials, presentations, and copy for websites or email blasts. Do some digging with your customers. Really try to understand where they are maturity-wise in that process. Do they understand the threat? Do they have what they need in place to protect them? I think that most importantly is don't let the sense of urgency slip through your grasp. As we discussed, skimming is happening daily. It's happening everywhere. It is top of mind and should be top of mind for your customers so that they aren't the next person like I showed you in all those other articles whose name is listed in the paper. To recap the value proposition to your customers, but also to you, the ECS Form 1 provides card data protection for the financial institution's customers. It provides protection for the retailers, FIs, and card issuers. If you're not having any skimming attacks, you could claim that it virtually eliminates claims and liabilities connected to those skimming incidents, or lack thereof. And it protects your customer's brand and reputation. At the same time, all of that, it creates an immediate net new revenue stream for your company that's outside of your core offerings. So to summarize, skimming is a global threat. It continues to grow in scope and persistence. it's accounting for the bulk of the bank card fraud we see today. The only way to protect financial institutions and their customers, which are also me and you, so that's where it helps me, it's through prevention. Right? FIs have both a fiduciary and regulatory responsibility to safeguard their customers and their assets, both the bank's assets, but also their customers' assets. So with that, anti-skimming solutions are a required fleet investment. Remember that the ECS 4-in-1 is compatible with both motorized and dip card readers. It has been purposely engineered to minimize false alarms, and it uses the market's only combination of dual photo sensing detection and jamming for complete protection. BJ, at this time, I'd love to turn it back over to you and see if we have any questions we can answer.
I don't have any questions in the question box at this point. Does anybody have anything they want to put in there and start typing so we can take a look at your questions and answer them? I was, again, watching this and thinking, on your slide about the increase in attacks, the increases on the financial institutions, the attacks are up 546% versus the non-FIs up 300%. I found that kind of interesting, why the attacks on non-FIs are up less than FIs.
So a couple things along that. One, foot traffic. So normally people are, I am, more interested in even going a little bit further out of my way to go back to my bank's ATMs that I know, or to an ATM that I'm familiar with. Another part of that is about reporting. So there is the requirement in place that the FI has to report if they find that. It's something they have to file. If it's the case of the 7-Eleven's little ATM that's sitting off to the side and they find something, they may or may not have to say anything. So what you see is the fact that that other number is actually growing at 3% with all of the non-regulations around it in many cases. But most of that also has to do with the foot traffic, right? The attacks are going to the places where these guys are scoping out many times before placing any kind of skimming device, and they get to see there's a lot more people coming to a particular location. It has a lot to do with it as well.
Okay. I have a question about how this compares with the NCR physical solution.
Well, so in this case, the core pieces are how it's detecting the skimming device, going back to the dual photo sensing technology along with the jamming. But the other part of this is it doesn't tie into the core. It doesn't have to tie into the network. And if I go back, I don't think there's an easy way for me to do that without sliding through everything. I could hit this. Let's do this. Sorry, guys. I'll slide you through here. But the idea that when that's done, the ECS, as it goes through the suspected modes, each of these can be set in a customized fashion. So if you want that, suspected mode to be 5-10 seconds each, as it clicks from set to set, it could be as much as you would like it to be if you wanted to suspect longer. But the idea is once it gets to that end and the alarm is sent, once the threat's been removed and that ECS device goes back to ready state, the ATM is ready to use again. You don't have to take down the ATM. It doesn't have to be rebooted. It is sitting essentially in line with the services for that ATM.
Okay. There's a couple questions here that are sort of similar. The first part of it being, can your device work with the factory installed anti-skimming, or does the manufacturer model have to be removed or disabled? And the other question related to that, does this get installed internally inside the ATM?
Yeah, so the ECS is installed inside of the ATM. That way it's also tamper-proof, right? Nobody can see that it has it, or that it would have an anti-skimming solution included. But the other part is that, yes, the other part of that question was, whether or not the factory installed anti-skimming solution would need to be taken offline, and that is correct, yes. So we'd only be able to run one of the two solutions simultaneously.
Okay. I have a question here from Rob Spinoza, which just says deep scanner, and a question mark is all I got on that. Do you understand the question, or Rob, can you type us some more? Deep scanner?
So we probably are addressing that as a question around deep insert skimming. And unless he wants to clarify, I would say that right now, we've got pilots in place for deep insert skimming. They're ready to go, or we're close, pardon me, to being able to launch that. And then if we go back to the idea around dip card readers, we have not seen any successful deep insert skimming for the dip cards because of the limited amount of space inside of that card reader. So it's where the bank card will get stuck inside the machine, or you can't kind of push in or push out. So that's usually, it keeps itself from being skimmed at that point. But if it was to that question, then we can also provide some additional details around what we're doing.
So explain to me what the deep skimming device is, and how is it different than the one we've been talking about?
The reason why that deep insert is the headache, or the current headache, is because although it's a lot more rare because of the time and the expertise needed to really make sure that it's in and working correctly, it's actually inside the machine. So what you're seeing that happen in is motorized card readers. And so in the U.S. we have mostly dip card readers. But so that's a lot of the articles are coming from Europe, especially, where motorized card readers even exist at the gas pump. But for us right now, that's why our solution's in pilot phase, is because we want to make sure that it is 100% ready for the market that it's about to go into. At the same time, we also want to make sure that we're properly educating everybody on the threat and the fact that the dip card reader is not completely at risk right now for what we see in the market.
Does the banking industry have plans to remove the mag stripe in the near future?
It's funny because that's always a question. I even had this conversation with my family as we were talking about some of the things that I was working on here with ACG, and the thought process around that is you would still have to have backwards compatible or a backwards compatible setup for everybody in the world. At some point in the world, yes, all cards won't have a magnetic stripe. But if that's happening in the next 5 years, I'd be surprised. 10 years? I mean, it's kind of like why if we as Americans would go over to, or maybe even North Americans, right? No, even going into Canada for travels, and I have to use my EVM chip, and it was done, I mean, this was years and years ago that I was seeing this happen. I still have a mag stripe on my card, and there are no plans to get rid of it. So until that's gone, we're still in the same spot, and that threat still exists.
Okay.
Meaning, still time.
Rick Kastner, can you let me know what it is that you want us to talk about on the repeat the answer to the question one? Can you just clarify that a little bit? And I have a question of who is legally responsible for the monetary loss caused by a skimmer?
Oh, that deserves like a steak dinner and beer to talk that over for a while. So at the end of the day, the conversations that we're having with like a Visa or MasterCard, ACG is having, is the card issuers. Sometimes the card issuer is the local financial institution. I see that with even some of my family members that are banking at rural locations, right? So that smaller, just a few branch institution is also going to be the card issuer in some cases. So today, it's going to be probably either the FI or that card issuer. But in any case, those funds have to be fought for and gotten back into the account. And that doesn't even take into account debit cards. So if you have a debit card, they're probably only, the bank might only be liable for up to $50. So anything else that's taken off of that card is gone. But there's a lot of intricacies to that, and we're having those conversations with the fuel pumps because is it really the gas station's fault? No, but now do I want to go get my gas there? No. And then there's also some laws out in place, like the state of Michigan, where they're pushing back the legal requirement to the gas station itself, whoever the owner is of that pump, that they should provide a safe and secure place for me to use my bank card without fear of getting it stolen, or without the fear of the data being siphoned off, right? The card data. But yeah, so I can probably provide some additional details around that, or maybe if that's something I could send to you to send out to the group that's logged on today, I can do that as well.
Okay, that would be great. What Rick was looking for, what had to do with the screenshot that's currently up there, and the fact that the ATM does not go down. Once a skimming is detected, could you please review what happens process-wise?
You bet. So let me back up a step. Let's see if it'll go backwards. So even these shots come from our demo lab in trying to describe this to prospects that are coming in to take a look at this in person. So something is blocking the bezel, essentially. It could be anything, right? But the ECS decides, hey, there's something that's changed. What you can see there in that D%, I won't get too technical on this, but what it's saying is it's a deviation in the known base level that it had. All right, it said, hey, as of right now, we're all good. It's been calibrated by the technician. It learns its environment roughly within that first 24 hours of installation. We're all set. So now it sees a deviation from that known good. It suspects one cycle. Now within that cycle time, if it's been removed, it goes back to ready status. But in this case, what I'm showing is something is still there and it's not moving. Again, it goes into the third stage, fourth stage, and then into the final fifth stage. Again, if at that point there's a skimming device on there, then it hits, that's when the alarm is sent.
Okay, and the remote monitoring is done through the alarm system?
It is, yeah. So, and that's where we go back to when we have longer conversations about this. We talk about the individual protocol. So, is the alarm message handed off to the financial institution? Is it going back to the monitoring company or the service provider that's handling those messages? It can be just as easy as having somebody go out and check the machine and remove whatever was there. Maybe it really was something where paper blew up against the machine, was held there due to the wind, something got stuck on there, or we go back to the idea that it really was something bad that was on there. The other thing is to understand that the jamming starts at that suspected one phase. So it is immediately protecting card data and jamming against any card data being removed from the card. And then the jamming is consistent through that entire suspected phase, again, until, and once the alarm message is sent, now it is in, it's blocked continuously until the threat's removed. The ECS detects that there is, again, a change in the environment that goes back to the known good baseline, and it sets up to be ready again.
Okay, I have a question about, is your anti-skimmer compatible with retail type ATMs?
Yeah, it's going to depend. So I was trying to address, I had originally addressed this a little more in depth on this webcast, but realized the complexities in getting into all the nuances of the models and the types and those kind of things. So I can definitely either provide my contact information along with the presentation deck, so if anybody had any specific questions or models that they were interested in, we could talk through those. I think where I got called off of that was, hey, what if I've got an ATM from 1982? I'm like, well, we'd have to talk about how that looks and the way that the bezel is either molded into the front of the ATM, is it separate? Those kind of things all come into play.
Talking about that, there is a question can you run this on the highest sung FI ATMs?
You bet. Yep, and we're already doing some of that today.
Okay. Going back to the alarm, can it be set up as a separate zone on the alarm, or is there a special output on the module to trip an alarm?
So I definitely can address the idea of, yeah, it needs to be its own, separate zone in this instance, because you want to be able to differentiate between anything else that's actually happening with the ATM of note and specifically just the skimming. It also allows you to route that alert into the correct protocol, right? So if you see the alert, maybe it can be somebody that during business hours at the bank would walk outside and go see, or at the particular branch would go look at that. Off hours, then, maybe somebody else does have to get involved. And then the second part of the question, again, if you could say that for me, BJ.
Well, it was an output on the module to trip an alarm. So, so the answer to that then is yes.
Okay, yes.
Now, going back to the question of all the different ATMs and everything, do you have a database of that? Do you have something you'd share of a list of the ATMs with brands and model numbers that the ECS 4-in-1 will work on?
So I've got something that we work with, but it's not something that's ready to share right now. So we can, so if there's somebody specific on this call that wanted to walk through the individual models that they have or that they're interested in looking at, I can definitely figure out a way to communicate that.
All right. One of the attendees is interested in getting the slides in order to create a customer-facing presentation, and that made me think, do you have a version of this that you used for FIs in the sales process that you'd be willing to share?
100%. And going back to the ways that ACG can help, that's something else that is near and dear to my heart, is making sure that this content can be branded for you, so it goes into your slide deck as you see fit. And then if it's something that we can boil this ocean and make sure that it's talking points, so if somebody is Googling anti-skimming, or they've had a skimming attack, that you're the first, and your web content too, so that they're hitting your website and seeing that that's a solution they can get through their local team or local service provider. That's another thing that's near and dear to me, making sure that that content is also created for you.
And yeah, they do want to make sure you put your contact information to get the ATMs that'll work with your device. So
okay.
That was just one of the questions here, is to make sure that's part of it.
You bet.
So actually, we can send out the set of slides from today's presentation, and then should I have them contact you to get a customer-facing version of it, or do you want to send that out as well?
Well, you know what I'll do, because I really formatted this. I was telling the internal team here as I was working on this, I really formatted this to be webinar friendly. So that's why there's big, huge pictures here without a title on it. What I can do is set up these slides so that they can be used a little bit easier, and I can also remove like the C3PO and unless you want to also put that in as part of your humor. But make sure that it's a little more clean in terms of a customer-facing presentation. You can also use these slides as is, but I will assemble that, and then I think I've got everybody's contact information here. I'll know the folks that will have been on the call today, and I can share that separate deck that would allow you to customize that a little bit easier for your own use. And again, going back to the comment on utilizing the account manager that you already work with here, or business development manager that you have at ACG, they probably also have their own slide deck that they could also share and help customize. So that's a little more hand-in-hand type action and help get you the messaging that you need for your customers.
I think that's it on the questions. I don't see any more coming in. If anybody's got anything, get it in now, because that seems to be the end of the Q&A. Okay, so again, thank you, and that was just an amazing amount of information. So thank you very much for that. And For those listening, ACG will be at the FISPA Las Vegas conference, May 17th through the 20th at Bally's. They'll be in booth 305 in the exhibits on Saturday. You knew I was going to put a plug in for the conference. And again, these webinars are part of the benefit of being a member of FSPA. So there's other topics you'd like to see Andy and ACG cover, or other topics that of other subjects you'd like, just let us know. So thank you for attending. Andy, do you have anything else?
Nothing other than a big thank you to everybody for the time you invested here, and I look forward to working with you.
All right. Thank you, FISPA members, and I hope you have a great afternoon. And thank you, ACG, for a great webinar. Thank you.
Bye-bye.